keeping on the subject of Trump tariffs, if we are getting slapped a new tariff that will hamper our exports, one of the key questions we need to ask is whether would this bleed into any other industries. Joining me now is Global Business Cycle Analyst Dr. Kenneth De Zilwa. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your time. I appreciate it and good to see you once again. A couple of things to discuss with you. Right now, we have to pay the 20% of taxes to our exports to the United States. And there's a bit of a confusion on whether the base tax will also apply. Now, the apparel sector is already crying foul as they believe their industries is at a tremendous risk even with these lower taxes. In your opinion, to which other areas will this tariff hit indirectly, and how will it trickle down to the large economy of ours, who is, let's not forget, is not still servicing debt?
Thanks, Mahesh, for inviting me onto the program. A very important question. Firstly, the apparel sector is the biggest exporter to the US. It accounts for almost 2/3 of the export value in terms of dollar terms to the US. So it's the single largest exposure there. The other sectors too, including rubber and fisheries and other spices too, also are affected in this whole tariff imposition on Sri Lanka. Now, having said that, I think the bigger challenge here is, and the bigger question is that we see, is the weaponization of trade, which is the most dangerous type of arrangement for Sri Lanka to be in. If the US can do it, so can other larger trade countries impose their will onto Sri Lanka and squeeze Sri Lanka tremendously. So that's something that has to be really thought through by the government. The second point is Sri Lanka is within a IMF program and doesn't have any fiscal space. Now, I've seen some people advocating, saying that to remove para tariffs and ensure that the trade deficit between US and Sri Lanka are narrowed. Now, while you remove the para tariffs, again the question is, within the IMF framework, we can't do that. Because we have to raise revenue, right? Even if it's $40 million that we'll forego in terms of taking out para tariffs, that significant component of revenue has to be recouped by some other party or some other sector or the public in Sri Lanka. So to remove para tariffs is not a good idea. It's there for a particular reason, and I think Sri Lanka should be cognizant of how to manage that. So these are the two key issues that we face while the US imposes tariffs on Sri Lanka, and the apparel sector is going to take a bigger hit. Sri Lanka doesn't have the luxury to subsidize any sector because it's currently within an IMF program.
Indeed. Doctor, when talking about foreign direct investments, the government says that currently there are many who are coming in. But making Sri Lanka a viable destination with tax brackets seems to be a changing policy as per the needs and wants of the IMF. Now, even recently, the whole tax breaks given to China over the port city is to be revamped because the IMF said so. How will this impact future investments?
Well, this is a bad precedent. You shouldn't tamper with existing legislation, particularly on the investment side. I mean, irrespective of which government has brought in such legislation, these are legislation that are currently being enjoyed by many investors in Sri Lanka, and investors looking into Sri Lanka will be discouraged because you want consistency in policy. The IMF coming in and trying to rehash most of these current acts and incentives has a bad flavor on investment, including domestic investment, at a time when Sri Lanka needs to reassure investors and regain confidence to build a strong capital base in terms of dollar inflows. This kind of shift in policy makes it extremely difficult and extremely unattractive, and Sri Lanka will lose out in the long run as well as in the short run, because the debt that needs to be serviced has to be serviced through external finance. External finance, we can't go to the capital markets, even though again people who are close to the IMF are pushing Sri Lanka to go externally to borrow. We should not do that. We should look at creating investor confidence and bringing investors into Sri Lanka, giving them that space to set up factories and to internalize savings than to go out and start borrowing again. So these types of IMF policies is something that we have been strongly criticizing from a pro-Sri Lanka point of view, and I think Sri Lanka needs to revisit the current agreement and create that space with the IMF if Sri Lanka is serious about ensuring that debt is manageable and sustainable, because debt currently is unsustainable. Even though the IMF may say it, that it's sustainable, the numbers don't support the IMF statement.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as always, good to talk to you, Doctor. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Kenneth De Zilwa, Global Business Cycle Analyst. Thank you very much.